I'm Colonel Douglas McGregor, CEO of Our Country, Our Choice, and this is Focus Points, what we hope will be a weekly show that shines a spotlight on what is happening at the grassroots all over the country. As we've launched Operation Focus, we've had patriots from around the country join Republic and post important local information. Our goal is to have a patriot in every town to act as your town's guardian, posting important information to help you and your community stay informed. We need local information and understanding now more than ever. Our attentions are drawn away from local, and few people are watching out for what is going on in our communities. As we know, the local news blind spots have been heavily exploited by hostile actors inside our country. We must begin the process of drawing attention to our own towns, where we live. It's not easy, but we need patriots to answer the call. Thanks to all of you who've already done this. We have a long way to go, and we need more help. As Operation Focus grows and Guardians post articles, events, and actions on Republic, we will continue to showcase and comment on those articles here, offering assignments for Guardians to provide areas of focus and share your thoughts and concerns. Republic is our repository for information, acting as a single place where information can be posted, held, and shared. As the election approaches, Republic is a place where if you see something, you can say something, and it will never be taken down, as is the case on other platforms. This is why Republic is crucial at this time. If you're willing to join us and answer the call, go to republic.us/Operation Focus, buy an account, put skin in the game, and begin shining a light on the things that are most important to you and your neighbors in your community. It's not for everyone, but for those who are willing to take the time, you are an absolute hero, and we will honor you here and showcase what you're doing. With that said, let's get over to Republic and take a look at what Guardians are posting right now. Now, before we go into the local material that I spoke about, in view of international events, I do want to spend a few moments on the topic of war. As you know, I've been to war, and I'm familiar with it, and I take it very seriously, as I think all Americans should. There's a wonderful article written by James Carden that was posted on Republic called Washington's Nuclear Delusions. It says we spend too much on weapons of mass destruction of our own. He makes a lot of good points. He notes that we spent $51 billion on nuclear weapons, accounting for 80% of the increase in nuclear spending by the 9 nuclear-armed countries in 2023. And then there is the plan, agreed to under President Obama, to update the entire strategic nuclear triad, the launching of nuclear weapons by land, sea, and air at the cost of another $1.5 trillion. Now, we're not here to argue for reductions in defense spending as it pertains to nuclear weapons. That's not the point. What he goes on to discuss, though, is this disheartening predisposition these days in Washington, D.C., to actually suggest that a nuclear war could be fought and won. We went through this in the 50s and the 60s, and by the time the 60s ended, we had largely concluded, I mean not just Americans, also the Soviets and other countries, that the notion of fighting and winning a nuclear war was delusional. He goes on to quote President John F. Kennedy, and he picked out some very, very useful sentences from President Kennedy. He said, "Every man, woman, and child lives under a nuclear sword of Damocles, hanging by the slenderest of threads, capable of being cut at any moment by accident or miscalculation or sheer madness." What is striking from the vantage point of 2024 is Kennedy's forthrightness at the time. This contrasts with the dishonesty with which today's national security officials discuss what they, as a matter of course, blandly refer to as our nuclear deterrent. I want you to stop and think about that, because the war that is building up now in the Middle East could conceivably escalate beyond the high-end conventional level and become nuclear. I don't think anyone wants that to happen. I don't believe for a second that anyone in the White House today wants that to happen. I don't think any Americans want it to happen, and certainly the Russians do not. President Putin has made that clear on numerous occasions. But we have a unique set of circumstances. And Israel is the lone nuclear power for the moment in the region. That, of course, could change very quickly depending upon what Israel does next and how Iran decides to act. I just want you to keep in mind that no one has debated this. No vote has been taken in Congress. No one anywhere has signed on for a war that could conceivably involve nuclear weapons. Stay tuned, pay attention, and don't miss the opportunity to inform people above you, people in our government, Congress, the Senate, even the White House, and tell them that this is something you do not want, because it's the last thing on earth that we might ever experience if it happens. Before we move on to the local level, I did want to pause one more time to remind you of something you probably know. In your community, there are people who have been to war. Some of them have been severely injured, others psychologically traumatized. Others may have had positive experiences insofar as having survived, but their stories are important. If you don't post their stories, if you don't go to Republic and let us know about them and what they've done, and some of these people may have been in the Second World War, the Korean War, the Vietnamese War, it makes no difference. We're simply interested in reminding people that these individuals are out there, and let them talk about war and what they experienced. War is a very serious business. There is a tendency in Washington to treat it in a cavalier fashion. We talk about going to war, we forget that certainly over the last 20 years, we have not fought very capable opponents. In fact, I would argue they were hapless opponents that could do nothing about us if we bombed them or dominated them with fire. That's changing. We are now in a very difficult situation, and we could confront capable enemies in the form not just of Iran, but also Russia. So go to Republic, think about these things, tell us who the veterans are, and bring their memories back to life. They may have a great deal to tell us and educate us. Now, with that behind us, I'd like to move on and talk about some of the local articles that have appeared on Republic that are really first rate. The first one is, Are Bexar County election results safe and secure? This is from San Antonio. This is a really good article, primarily because the author raises critical questions. He starts off by saying, are election results true and verifiable? If so, why is the county worried about cybersecurity? Can you really go back to the paper ballot? Who is in charge of the paper ballot? And what is the custody chain? Who makes sure every electronic vote matches the paper vote? Was a bipartisan backtest done on the 2020 election to make sure every electronic vote matched every paper ballot? Why do you need electronic ballots if you have paper ballots? Are electronic ballots sent to Spain for counting? Who is overseeing the aggregation of the electronic votes? There's so many questions raised and so very little transparency, and that explains, in the author's mind, why there's so little trust right now in government. And that trust begins at the lowest level and works its way up. So I urge you to look at this and ask these questions, because Election Day is not far off. Those questions should be uppermost in your mind when you go to the polls. That's another reason we want you on Republic to tell us what you find out, what you suspect, what you think. The next one is called The Shocking Corruption is So Widespread It's in Every Community. This is an article that I was really surprised to see. The author starts off by saying, a few weeks back, I came across an article about a deputy sheriff from Millersville, Tennessee, who is working on some big investigation, at least until the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation broke into his house, Mar-a-Lago style, and absconded with all the evidentiary records he had collected. The story seemed rather odd, especially for such a small town as Millersville, perhaps 7,000 residents. But now, that what was going on behind the scenes is becoming more clear. Last week, there was a press conference in Las Vegas, Nevada, where much of what the Millersville Deputy Sheriff, Sean Taylor, and others had been working on was brought to light. And it's beyond stunning, especially when you realize it's happening in our own hometowns. He goes on to list everything, but he makes a number of really important comments. The story is unbelievably far-flung, starting with 15 border states and transnational shell companies that are buying up residences and cities from Louisville, Kentucky to Nashville, Tennessee, to Maricopa County, Arizona, and beyond. It involves systemic public corruption, the pricing for everything we buy, child trafficking, money laundering, missing and murdered persons, campaign financing for every level of government, from local to federal politicians, in every community in the country. No community is exempt. This is a really good article, and I urge you to go on and find it, read it, because it raises some very serious questions, as the previous one did, about what's happening right now in virtually all of our communities. It's hard to imagine a world where corruption would not exist when you look at the trillions of dollars simply from the drug trade and the human trafficking that flood into the United States. The next one is called Citizens Expose Unethical Practices Committed by County Judge. Now, I found this one almost comical because this particular county judge, apparently in Burnett County, Texas, was trying to shut down any opposition, shut down any hard questions, especially when it was about a sheriff or someone in his office charged with a felony for alleged payroll irregularities. Again, this is a great short article, but it really pulls no punches. And it tells you the more information button below will direct leaders to the Dropbox folder, which shares evidence of public information taken from the Burnett County Commissioner's Court official record. This is important because these kinds of records are now in the form, in many cases, of videotape. You want to know what happened in a courtroom. You want to know what happened in any criminal setting of any kind. There is so much videotape evidence out there that it really needs to be posted. Anyway, the effort to prevent the district attorney from asking any hard questions in court and on the agenda was a failure. And the good news is this judge is being exposed and is going, I think, at some point to be prosecuted. At any rate, this is first-class reporting by an OCOC member. The last article that we found on Republic that we thought was one of the best about, once again, voter fraud or the absence of electoral integrity was posted by an eminent man named Jerome Corsi, who spent a substantial portion of his life tracking electoral fraud, voter fraud. And he's gotten very involved with what he calls non-existent voters that are hidden. Beyond just creating non-existent voters, the cryptographic algorithms inside software that is used to count votes assign legitimate state voter IDs to non-existent voters. This last step enables the criminal perpetrators to vote these non-existent voters as apparently legal mail-in votes in what could be sufficient quantities to steal an otherwise losing election. This is very important. He's getting into something that we heard a lot about, that we were unable to do much about, frankly, in 2020. The only way to address the problem of these phantom voters is to halt certification and analyze the databases. However, the rush to certify votes quickly and without question made doing so impossible. It forced Arizona counties to hustle out certifications, even if they believed they were invalid, or risk disenfranchising every voter in the county. In conclusion, Dr. Corsi says, All it may take to expose election fraud in the future, should the voting counting patterns seen in 2020 be repeated in 2024, is for one county in a battleground state to refuse to certify the election. Now, you'll remember there were many people arguing that the election should not be certified in many counties, but they were effectively sidelined. Enormous pressure was brought on people to make sure the certification process went forward. The rush to certify a fraudulent election is a necessary part of the algorithm mail-in ballot scheme. Slowing down certification, even in one county, may gain the time needed to conduct a forensic examination to determine if the algorithm was used to trigger the mail-in votes in the objecting county and how many of the mail-in ballots cast in that county were fraudulent. Validation that a cryptographic algorithm permitted decisive mail-in ballots in one county would then lend credence to all states where similar cryptographic algorithms are found. In other words, what we find in one county may very well exist in many counties. We weren't able to do much about this in 2020. We weren't prepared. We didn't know. The situation has changed. That doesn't mean it'll be any easier this time around. No one wants to ask hard questions, particularly the party in power. Whatever party that is, it doesn't matter. They simply want to stay in power. So the patriots that took the time to post these articles have done exemplary work for all of us. This is the kind of thing we need on Republic. Lastly, we did want to point to something that we at Our Country, Our Choice regard as extremely positive on the Republic platform. One reason Republic is so powerful and unique is that you as a user can tag representatives when you write articles or post videos. We've seen members use this feature to provide a sense of accountability for both good and bad behavior on the part of elected or appointed officials. So, thank you so much for listening this week. We'll have more for you next week. And keep the articles coming. It's vital and essential. Remember, the man who said, "The truth will set you free," is right. It's up to us to get the truth out there. You are out where it happens. Give us the truth so we can give it to others. Thanks so much.